So, Milarepa, huh? I bet you're here because, like me, you're fascinated by this whole idea of someone going from, like, a seriously dark past to reaching enlightenment.
Yeah, it's very remarkable.
We've got some great sources lined up for this deep dive.
Oh, yeah.
Excerpts from the Wisdom Echoes podcast, some more in-depth analysis. Should be interesting.
It really is a story that just seems to resonate across time and cultures, doesn't it?
Totally.
That idea of messing up badly, but then finding a way back, not just to, like, redemption, but to, like, genuine wisdom.
Yeah.
I don't know, it speaks to something deep. You know?
Yeah, for sure. And it all starts in Tibet. Milarepa starts out in a wealthy family, but then his father dies, and
Yeah, and then it takes a turn.
his aunt and uncle, well, they're not exactly the kindest folks.
No, not really.
They basically take everything, leaving Milarepa and his mother with nothing.
It's that betrayal, that really sets the stage for his descent into darkness. You can almost feel the rage and resentment building inside him. Driven by desperation, he turns to black magic as a way to, like, reclaim some sense of control.
Yeah, this part always gets to me. The sources mention, like, death and destruction.
Right.
That's pretty heavy stuff.
It is.
But then there's this wave of remorse, this realization of the terrible consequences of his actions.
And that's when things start to shift, right?
Right. That's when he starts seeking redemption. I'm curious, though, how does the Buddhist view of suffering differ from, how we typically think about it? And how does that connect to this whole idea of redemption?
That's a really great question. In Buddhism, suffering isn't just something to avoid at all costs. It's seen as like an inherent part of existence,
Okay.
But it's also seen as a catalyst for awakening. The key is to understand the cause of suffering and how to break free from those cycles.
Right.
So for Milarepa, this intense remorse, it wasn't just guilt, it was a turning point.
I see.
This recognition that his actions created suffering, both for himself and for others. This fuels his desire for something different, something more.
Okay, so let's break this down a bit. He's driven by this need for change and eventually finds Marpa the translator.
But Marpa, this renowned teacher, he really puts Milarepa through the ringer.
He did.
Years of backbreaking labor, building towers, tearing them down over and over again.
Yeah, some might even say Marpa's methods were, like, abusive.
Right. How would you address that criticism?
It's definitely a perspective worth considering. But it's crucial to understand this through the lens of Tibetan Buddhism.
Okay.
Marpa wasn't engaging in punishment, but in purification. He recognized that while Milarepa had remorse, there were deeper layers of ego, anger, attachment that needed to be kind of purified before the true teachings could take root.
Okay.
These trials, they were designed to break down those barriers, to cultivate humility, resilience, to prepare the ground for something much deeper.
So instead of pointless suffering, it was about using that suffering as a tool for transformation.
Exactly.
That's a concept that runs throughout Buddhist philosophy, right?
It does.
The idea that our challenges, when met with the right understanding and intention, can actually become the fuel for our awakening.
Wait, that's pretty profound when you think about it. It's not about avoiding suffering, it's about learning how to use it. So for years, Milarepa endures this, driven by a deep desire for change. It makes you wonder, though, what kept him going through all of that? Was it just blind obedience, or was there something more?
It was definitely more than blind obedience. He had this burning desire for change, a willingness to surrender to the process, even when it was incredibly painful.
Yeah.
But there's another element here, too. Trust. Despite the hardship, Milarepa somehow sensed that Marpa had his best interests at heart, that there was a deeper purpose to all of this.
Interesting.
That trust, coupled with his own determination, allowed him to keep going when others might have given up.
It really highlights the power of that guru-disciple relationship, doesn't it?
It does.
That trust, that guidance seems so crucial to his journey.
Absolutely. The guru isn't just a teacher. They're a guide, a mentor, who can see our potential even when we can't see it ourselves, who can push us beyond our comfort zones and help us access those depths within ourselves that we didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
That kind of relationship can be incredibly transformative.
Okay, so after all that, what did Marpa actually teach Milarepa? I mean, we know he was a renowned teacher, but what wisdom did he impart that, like, built on this intense period of purification?
Well, this is where Milarepa's journey takes a truly significant turn. Now that he's purified his karma, Marpa can finally transmit the profound teachings on meditation and enlightenment.
So we're talking about this pivotal moment where Marpa actually starts teaching Milarepa. It's a shift from like intense physical labor to the realm of the mind and enlightenment. Something that always strikes me about the story is how interconnected it is with the Tibetan landscape.
Right.
The mountains, the isolation, it all seems so integral to his transformation. What role do you think the landscape played in his journey?
It's a crucial element, for
Yeah.
sure, and not just as like a backdrop. The ruggedness of the Himalayas, the harsh climate, the solitude, it all mirrors those internal challenges Milarepa was confronting. The external landscape, it becomes a reflection of his inner landscape.
That's fascinating. It's like the land itself became another teacher, pushing him to confront his limits,
Exactly.
both physically and mentally.
Yeah, the physical challenges, the lack of food, the exposure to the elements, it forces him to develop resilience and a deep connection with the natural world. But even more importantly, that isolation, it creates the space for, like, deep introspection.
Right.
There's no escaping yourself in that vast emptiness of the mountains.
You mentioned before that you wanted to understand more about the specific practice of Mahamudra meditation,
Oh, yeah.
which is central to Milarepa's teachings. How does this practice relate to that sense of isolation and emptiness?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. Mahamudra, which translates to, like, Great Seal, is all about recognizing the true nature of mind.
Okay.
It focuses on two key aspects, emptiness and luminosity.
Emptiness.
Now, when we talk about emptiness in this context, it's not about the mind being like blank.
Right.
It's about recognizing that all phenomena, including our thoughts and emotions, are impermanent and like lack inherent existence.
So it's about seeing through the illusion of solidity.
Yeah.
Those stories we tell ourselves about like who we are and what's real.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this ties directly into the experience of being in that vast empty landscape. The mountains, the sky, they reflect that inherent emptiness, that lack of solidity. It becomes a living teaching.
Okay, I'm with you. And what about the luminosity aspect? How does that fit into the picture?
Luminosity refers to the innate clarity and awareness that is the ground of all experience. It's the knowing that's always present, even when our minds are like cluttered with thoughts and emotions.
I see.
Through Mahamudra meditation, we practice recognizing and resting in that awareness, allowing thoughts to like arise and pass without getting caught up in them.
So by practicing in that isolated environment, surrounded by the vastness of the mountains, the sky, Milarepa was able to tap into that emptiness and luminosity in a more profound way.
Absolutely. The outer landscape, it provided the perfect conditions for cultivating those inner qualities. It's no coincidence that so many Tibetan Buddhist practices emphasize retreat and solitude.
Makes you want to book a one-way ticket to the Himalayas, doesn't it? But speaking of the inner landscape, we've talked about Milarepa's dark past and his quest for redemption. He wasn't just seeking personal liberation, though, was he? Compassion seems to be a really strong theme in his teachings.
Absolutely. It's one thing to achieve like a sense of individual peace and freedom,
Right.
But Milarepa's teachings, they go beyond that. He emphasizes extending that compassion outwards, actively working to alleviate the suffering of others.
And that wasn't just some abstract concept for him.
No.
The sources mention stories of him going to great lengths to help those in need, even putting himself at risk.
He truly embodied that compassion. It wasn't just words, it was action. And this is where his teachings become so powerful. They're rooted in that lived experience, in that genuine desire to ease suffering, to connect with others.
So for someone following Milarepa's path, it's not enough to just meditate on compassion.
Right.
You actually have to bring it into the world, express it through your actions. How does one cultivate that kind of active compassion?
It starts with cultivating a heart that's genuinely open to the suffering of others, a willingness to extend a helping hand without judgment, without expectation. It's about recognizing that our own liberation is intertwined with the liberation of all beings.
That's a beautiful idea.
It is.
But it also seems incredibly challenging, especially in a world that often feels so divided, so full of conflict.
It is. And that's why the path of compassion requires like ongoing practice,
Yeah.
a commitment to showing up with an open heart, even when it's difficult, even when we encounter resistance or negativity.
So we've got the external landscape, this emphasis on compassion, and of course, meditation. What other specific practices did Milarepa emphasize on the path to enlightenment?
Well, aside from Mahamudra meditation, which we've already touched on, he placed a strong emphasis on Lujong,
Gujang.
a set of mind training practices designed to transform those negative emotions and cultivate positive qualities like patience and wisdom.
Mind training, huh? Sounds intense. What does that actually involve?
It's about recognizing those negative emotions that cause us suffering, anger, jealousy, fear, that kind of stuff.
Right.
But instead of trying to suppress them or ignore them, Lojong provides techniques to actually use those emotions as fuel for growth.
So instead of running away from those difficult emotions, you actually engage with them, use them as opportunities for transformation.
Exactly. It's a radical approach, and it speaks to the core of Milarepa's teachings. It's about acknowledging that darkness within ourselves and using it as a stepping stone to greater wisdom and compassion.
It's almost like saying, don't be afraid of your shadow self. Embrace it, work with it, and see what emerges on the other side.
That's a great way to put it. It's about recognizing that even our negativity, our suffering, can be a source of profound learning and transformation if we approach it with the right attitude and tools.
So Lojong is about training the mind to view those challenges, those difficult emotions, as opportunities to deepen our practice.
Precisely. And this is a practice that's relevant for everyone, regardless of their spiritual background. It's about cultivating a resilience of mind, a capacity to meet challenges with wisdom and compassion.
It's about realizing that those difficult emotions, those challenging experiences, are not something to fear or avoid, but something to engage with, to learn from, to use as fuel for our own awakening.
Beautifully put. And that's one of the most profound messages that Milarepa offers through his teachings. It's a path to liberation that's available to all who are willing to embark on the journey, to confront their own darkness, and to cultivate the qualities of mind that lead to true freedom and happiness.
That's incredibly inspiring. But I imagine this path isn't without its obstacles.
Right.
What were some of the pitfalls that Milarepa warned against, those things that could potentially derail someone on their spiritual journey?
Milarepa was very aware of those pitfalls. Having encountered many of them himself.
Oh, yeah.
One of the biggest ones he cautioned against was spiritual materialism.
Spiritual materialism.
Yeah.
That's an interesting term. What did he mean by that?
It's about using spirituality to, bolster the ego, to gain status, material possessions, rather than for genuine inner transformation.
Right.
It can manifest in so many ways,
Oh, I bet.
like obsessing over having the right meditation cushion, name-dropping famous teachers, or constantly comparing our spiritual progress to others.
Yeah.
It's about mistaking the outer trackings of spirituality for the true essence.
So it's like using spirituality as a way to feel superior or to, accumulate spiritual experiences like they're trophies.
Exactly. And this can become a major obstacle to real progress. Milarepa was adamant about recognizing and dismantling those subtle forms of ego clinging.
It seems like humility is key here, recognizing that the path is not about achieving some kind of special status,
Right?
but about shedding those attachments and connecting with something much larger than ourselves.
Absolutely. True spiritual growth requires a willingness to let go of those ego-driven motivations
Right.
and to approach the path with a sense of humility, open-mindedness.
Were there any other pitfalls that he warned about?
Another subtle trap he highlighted was spiritual bypassing.
Spiritual bypassing. I've heard that term, but I'm not entirely sure what it means.
It's essentially using spiritual ideas or practices to avoid dealing with, difficult emotions or real-life problems.
Okay.
It's like using meditation to check out of reality instead of engaging with it in a more skillful way.
So using spirituality as a way to numb ourselves out instead of confronting those uncomfortable parts of ourselves.
Precisely. While spiritual practices can be incredibly helpful for coping with challenges, they can also be misused as a way to bypass the messy work of personal growth. Milarepa was adamant about facing those inner demons head-on,
Yeah.
leaning into discomfort as a path to true liberation.
He doesn't let you off easy, does he? It seems like a recurring theme is this willingness to confront the difficult stuff, both internally and externally.
That's the essence of his teachings, yeah. He doesn't sugarcoat the path.
Right.
True transformation requires a willingness to look deeply into ourselves, acknowledge our shadow side, and work with it skillfully.
So aside from avoiding those pitfalls, did he offer any specific advice for staying on track, for navigating the challenges of the spiritual path?
Absolutely. He offered a wealth of practical guidance. One of his core teachings was the importance of cultivating a strong ethical foundation.
So it's not just about meditating in a cave.
No.
It's about living a life of integrity and kindness.
Exactly. Ethical conduct was paramount to Milarepa. It's not just about following rules. It's about aligning our actions with our understanding of interconnectedness, compassion.
It sounds like it's about living in a way that minimizes harm and contributes to the well-being of all beings.
Precisely. And this isn't about striving for some unattainable ideal of perfection,
Right.
It's about making conscious choices in our everyday lives that reflect those values.
So ethical conduct and what else?
He also placed great emphasis on the practice of renunciation, but not in the way we might typically think about it.
When I hear renunciation, I think of giving up all my possessions and becoming a monk.
It's not about that. For Milarepa, renunciation meant letting go of attachment to things, to the idea that our happiness depends on external circumstances.
So it's more about an internal shift,
Yeah,
recognizing that true happiness comes from within rather than chasing external things.
exactly. It's about cultivating contentment with what we have while also being willing to let go of what no longer serves us.
That sounds incredibly liberating, to free ourselves from that constant need for more.
It is. And that freedom, it creates space for genuine spiritual growth, for connecting with the abundance that already exists within and around us.
So we've got ethical conduct, renunciation, and of course, mindfulness.
Yes, mindfulness was central to Milarepa's teachings. He saw it as the foundation for all other practices, a way to cultivate a deep awareness of the present moment without judgment.
So it's about paying attention, being present with our thoughts, emotions, and sensations as they arise.
Precisely. By cultivating mindfulness, we start to see our patterns, our habits, our reactions more clearly.
Right.
It allows us to choose how we respond rather than just reacting habitually.
It sounds like mindfulness is a practice that can benefit every aspect of life,
Yeah.
not just our spiritual practice.
Absolutely. It's about bringing that awareness into everything we do, from our interactions with others to the simplest everyday activities.
You mentioned earlier that Milarepa emphasized trust in the process.
Yeah.
Is that what he meant by faith?
Yes. Faith was another key element he emphasized. But it's not about, blind belief.
Right.
It's about cultivating a deep trust in the path, in the teachings, and in our own innate capacity for awakening.
That was like an inner knowing, a confidence that we're on the right track, even when things get challenging.
Exactly. That faith is essential for navigating those inevitable moments of doubt, of uncertainty that arise on the spiritual path.
It sounds like a lot of these teachings are about developing inner strength, resilience, but there's also something else that seems to run through Milarepa's teachings, something a bit more unexpected.
Humor. Ah, yes.
Yeah.
Humor was incredibly important to him.
Yeah.
He saw it as an antidote to this seriousness, this self-importance that can sometimes creep into spiritual practice.
So it's about not taking ourselves too seriously, about remembering to laugh along the way.
Precisely. He saw humor as a way to lighten up, to detach from our ego, to approach the path with a more playful attitude. He reminds us that enlightenment is not about becoming some kind of stoic, humorless being. It's about embracing the fullness of life, with all its joys and sorrows, and finding liberation within that.
It's a beautiful reminder that even on a path as profound as this, there's always room for joy, for laughter, for a bit of lightness.
Absolutely. And that lightness can be incredibly healing. It helps us shift our perspective, release tension, reconnect with a sense of wonder. It reminds us that the journey itself is a gift, not just the destination.
So ethical conduct, renunciation, mindfulness, faith, and even humor.
Yeah.
It's a rich tapestry of teachings and practices. But as we're exploring all this, one question keeps coming up for me. What did Milarepa actually say about the nature of enlightenment itself? What was his vision of that ultimate goal?
That's a question that takes us to the heart of his teachings, to the essence of his realization. And it's not an easy one to answer because enlightenment, by its very nature, transcends conceptual understanding. It can't be fully grasped with the intellect or captured in words.
So it's something that's experienced rather than understood?
Precisely. It's a direct experience, a profound shift in perception, a radical transformation of our way of being in the world. But while words may fall short, Milarepa does offer glimpses into the nature of enlightenment through his songs and teachings.
What are some of the qualities he points to? What does this state of enlightenment actually look and feel like?
One of the key characteristics he emphasizes is a profound sense of freedom.
Freedom from what exactly?
Freedom from the limitations of our ego, from the tyranny of our thoughts and emotions, from the suffering that arises from attachment and aversion.
So it's about breaking free from those mental and emotional patterns that keep us trapped in those cycles of suffering.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our true nature is not limited by those patterns, that we are inherently free, boundless, and interconnected with all that is.
That sounds incredibly liberating.
It is. And it's not something we achieve through, force or effort.
Right.
It's something we discover as we let go of those limiting beliefs and identities, as we surrender to what is
So enlightenment is not about becoming something we're not, but about uncovering and revealing our true nature.
Precisely. And that true nature is characterized by qualities like peace, contentment, and an unwavering compassion that extends to all beings.
Those are qualities that we can all aspire to cultivate in our own lives, even if we never reach that same level of realization as Milarepa.
Absolutely. And the beauty of it is that the path itself is transformative.
Hmm.
Even if we never fully arrive, the very act of engaging with these teachings, of practicing these techniques, can bring about profound shifts in our experience of ourselves and the world.
So it's not just about the destination, it's about the journey itself.
Exactly. And that journey is an invitation to awaken to our true potential, to discover the boundless wisdom, compassion, and joy that reside within each of us.
Well, I think that's a beautiful note to end on.
Indeed. May we all find inspiration in Milarepa's example, and may we all continue to walk the path of awakening with courage, determination, and an open heart.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the life and legacy of Milarepa. Until next time, may you find peace, wisdom, and the boundless joy of enlightenment.